Hello everyone, welcome to Fishin, the podcast where we discuss Modern's most competitive tribe and help the whole community become better Merfolk players. I'm Kody, one of the co-hosts of the show, and not Kody Smith on Twitter. And we also have, as always, Matt. How are you doing, Matt?
Sometimes, Matt. I'm doing okay. Again, I want to apologize for being a little less frequent these last couple weeks. As some of you guys know, I'm going back and getting another master's degree. And this one is actually a little bit harder than anticipated. So I had a midterm last week, and as of Saturday, I worked in front of my computer for 16 straight hours. So I'm walking around a little bit like Quasimodo. My brain kind of hurts. I got this weird pain in my arm. My wife says it might be a heart attack, but I think I'll be okay. I had some bacon this morning. So I don't know, but I'm here. I'm ready to talk some Magic.
All right, it's good to have you back, my friend. And so we have a special guest this week to kind of help us discuss getting back into Modern. We haven't talked about Modern in some time, so it'll be good to
Modern.
What is a Modern?
What is a Modern?
But we have a special guest to kind of help us dive back into Modern. I get
it. That was the thing, right?
Yeah,
dive back in.
It was definitely on purpose and not on accident in any way. And our guest this week is Merfolk Joe. How are you doing, Joe?
Hey, Joe. Thank you.
Hey guys, are there actually other formats other than Modern?
There are other formats. There's
There is the one true
Frontier,
format, and that is Arena, and what Arena gives us.
Like there's like kitchen table Modern, and then like competitive Modern, and then really competitive Modern.
So, Joe, could you give us a little introduction and tell us about where we can find you on the internet and what you do and all that fun stuff?
Well, and real quick, Joe said that Kody's not allowed to call him Merfolk Joe constantly, so we're gonna keep a tally of how many times Kody screws that up.
All right, that sounds fair. No, I mean you could say it as many times as you want. It's just kind of like funny, right? I mean,
it's cumbersome.
Merfolk
it is very cumbersome.
It is what it is. My name.
You might have to splice cumbersome the song. Every time you do that.
So guys, I am on YouTube at Merfolk Joe. Just type it in and I'll show up. I'm not a big social media guy in general, so I don't have Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. So just check me out on YouTube. I've been doing it it's a long time now. Like, I don't even know, 4 years or something. I'm just guessing. But it started, I had this idea where, I've been playing Merfolk for already a few years and had obviously a lot of observations about the way that it plays. It's a deck that I personally find, really kind of can hook you. Another Merfolk pun.
Haha.
I get it.
And
because fish hooks go in fish, and Merfolk are fish.
You're so quick. Yeah. Okay. So anyhow, moving on. Anyhow, I was really sort of fascinated by the deck, and I wanted to share what I had learned with everybody. And I made this primer series. It was, I think, 7 videos, and it took me a long time. It had a lot of slides and discussed all those sort of different aspects you could look at the deck from, like the general strategy to its position in the metagame, to the lands and the creatures and, how they all work together. And that was just, I guess, Merfolk Joe's guide to Merfolk, or to modern Merfolk. And I think it has, thousands and thousands of views at this point. So it seems like some people have found it useful. And since then, I've just, uploaded a lot of gameplay videos and try to keep up with the times, all the subtle shifts in the deck and the metagame, and just do my best. There have definitely been patches where I haven't been very good about uploading. I'm sure, you're doing a second master's degree. You understand, life gets in the way sometimes, but
absolutely.
I have a Patreon page. So I really want to thank the patrons who have stuck with me. There's like a small handful of you guys. I could understand people, abandoning ship when I don't upload in like 2 months, but I definitely do my best, and I appreciate all the support I get from you guys.
What's that Patreon address?
It's just Merfolk Joe, patreon.com/Merfolk Joe, I think.
Sweet. So before we
real quick, Kody, I want to interject real quickly. And I do want to say absolutely just thank you for being on. As you're not so much into social media, you probably don't know this, but anytime we talk Modern, we talk you and Nikachu, because you guys are really the kind of the 2 pillars of the Modern community when it comes to Merfolk. So there's a lot of times that we are just dissecting decks, and a lot of times it's stuff that you've done and kind of your gameplay and your strategy. So it's just really cool to be able to talk Modern with you live, face to face, or I guess I'm not looking at you, but voice to voice.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thank you guys very much for inviting me to participate. I think it's kind of amazing that we have all these content creators sort of around Merfolk. I don't know that a lot of other decks or any other decks have that kind of passion in their community. So I'm really happy to be here with you guys.
You got the one goblin guy just kind of raising his fist right now.
And I do want to say I'm flattered that you guys are compare me with Nikachu. He's been really, really consistent with his uploads forever, and it's so helpful to have somebody who's so passionate and persistent in his presence and the way that he shares everything with us is it's very much appreciated, and to be mentioned alongside him is, as I said, flattering. So thanks.
Yeah, not a problem. So before we get into our show as normal, we want to thank our listeners and subscribers. And remember that a good way to support the show is by rating the show in the iTunes podcast and just telling a friend. If you have a friend of yours that kind of plays Merfolk on the side or has a really cool Merfolk commander deck, make sure to tell them about the podcast. That's a great way to help spread the word.
So Kody, I came up with this system. So everybody should go find 10 friends and tell them about the podcast. And then those 10 friends should tell 10 friends. And those 10 friends should tell 10 friends. And then lots of people know about the podcast. I'm calling it my triangle theme. Everybody should look at this triangle. So we're like the top of the triangle, and we're going to make the triangle bigger.
It's a triangle theme, not a pyramid scheme.
That sounds like a grandma email, like if you want to cure this woman of her cancer, send it to 10 of your friends.
Well, yeah. I got the idea from my friend from Africa, who's a prince, who was going to send me like $2 million. I'm waiting on the check to clear.
Sounds like a good deal.
Yeah, it really
does.
You
guys know Black Lotuses? Because they're on me.
I do want to say that we have a survey that will be in the show notes. I have it pinned to the top of our Twitter. It is basically just a survey that kind of talks about our current Patreon rewards as well as potential Patreon rewards. We want to find out how to give back to you the best. We've had a little bit of a dip in Patreon support, and we totally understand, financial situations change. And so we wouldn't ever ask anybody to give, if they're not able to, but we do appreciate your continued support. Like those, like the support of Jason M and my wife, Jessica Smith, who was one of our first patrons, but she's given us $12 to the Patreon. Jess. But thank you to our patrons. You guys mean a lot to us. We also have, Teespring store. I promise I will get some more shirts uploaded here soon, and as well as Inked Gaming, our sponsor. If you use the code FishCast10 at checkout, you get 10% off your purchase, and that all comes to help us out here at your favorite Merfolk podcast, which hopefully is your only Merfolk podcast. But yeah, and we also have our own playmats up, so those are pretty sweet. So if you like Merfolk and you want to support the show, buy those playmats. Use the coupon code FishCast10, and we will be.
How cool is this thing?
Yeah,
this is like the coolest playmat ever.
I don't think I've seen the playmat, so I might have to pick one of those up.
Yeah, they're pretty sweet. We had Ishton do the artwork, who does a lot of the chibi Merfolk on Twitter. I know you're not a big Twitter guy, Joe, but they're kind of. I
use Reddit all this time, so I've seen her stuff on Reddit.
Yeah, no, it's all great, and Ishton is a great artist. So, all right. So before we get into the main topic, which again we're going to be talking about Merfolk in Modern, like the state of Modern and where Merfolk rests in that spot. But we are going to talk about.
It's not bad.
We're going to be talking about the random Merfolk card, and this random Merfolk is
spoiler. It's not bad.
It's not.
It's actually random. You got to believe me.
It really was random. Joe picked a number off the top of his head right when we started this Skype call. So you picked random number 200.
Right, we started the Skype call, Kody. Really?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. So half an hour after we started
the Skype call.
Yeah.
Mr. 30 minutes late.
Okay.
So Joe, do you want to read this random Merfolk for us?
Sure. So I think the number was like 128, and you pulled up Misscaller. So some of you may have seen this card before. So it's Misscaller. It's from Magic 2019. it's a creature, a Merfolk wizard, a 1/1, and its ability says sacrifice Mistcaller. Until end of turn, if a non-token creature would enter the battlefield and it wasn't cast, exile it instead. And the flavor text reads, hospitality is of little concern to those who do not wish to be disturbed. Well, that's deep, huh? Get it deep?
Waka waka!
So anyhow, Mistcaller, yeah.
So this card has seen a lot of play recently.
Cody and I love this card.
Yeah, it's relevant.
Now, Joe, I think you have a hot take, though. I think it's burning. It's straight fire.
On my take on Mistcaller?
Yeah.
All right. So look, I'm gonna say Mistcaller is not the weakest Merfolk that was ever printed. It definitely can do some work. There are matchups that it's quite good against, like there's Phoenix decks and I don't know, whatever, Dredge, Hollow One, things where things are popping up from the graveyard all the time. But that's still just a small slice of the metagame, and it kind of saddens me that the card has been getting a lot of play in main decks because I don't know, offhand I can't name like a fringe human sideboard card. Imagine if humans just main decked Is It Staticaster because it was like the best choice, you know, like it's just sad, right? I mean, it's like we have so few decent Merfolk to choose from that we're going to run this card that's only actually good in 5 matchups out of like
Wizards
700.
can't print more Merfolk, then they wouldn't be able to print more humans.
What?
We have to have 30 humans to every Merfolk card.
Fair. Yes, that does get to the heart of the issue. So anyhow, Mistcaller for the last like 2 months has been main deck for like most modern Merfolk pilots, I think. And as I said, it's just kind of saddening because it's not a card that should be played in a main deck. Sort of full stop, right? And anybody who plays Magic should be able to agree with me, right? Like imagine somebody new to Magic and they read this card. It's like, okay, until the end of turn. Oh, it's like, okay, so what does that even do? You know, it's like people are like, okay, so there are these crazy combo decks you see where like things sometimes come back from the graveyard. It's like, yeah, but what about creatures attacking each other, you know, and things like getting killed and bounced? And it's just like, well, Mistcaller doesn't really interact on normal axes. It just sort of happens to help a little bit against this one particular approach that certain decks take. So not in the main deck. I definitely could appreciate some people playing like 1 or 2 of them in the sideboard alongside some other cards that do things against graveyard strategies like Relic of Progenitus or Surgical Extraction, those kinds of things. So anyhow, that's about it. That's my hot take on Mistcaller.
Now I've got something to kind of ask you about because now when Mistcaller was printed, it generally wasn't seen as very powerful. Then we kind of saw Modern kind of shift into this very super fast format with Dredge and with Arclight Phoenix.
No, in Modern, in Legacy, we kind of saw the power level that it could potentially have.
Yeah, well, Legacy and Vintage are 2 different monsters. We're just talking about...
Yeah, well, and Joe's here, and we're talking predominantly Modern, but I do want to mention that Mistcaller has a place in Legacy Merfolk.
Is it main decked in Legacy right now?
It is not. No, it's sideboard.
Well, that's fine, right? I mean, so it's like I know that Reanimator in Legacy is extremely powerful, right? And very popular.
Exactly,
right?
And then Sneak and Show and things like that. And Legacy cheats a lot more.
Sure, and even right, so it doesn't have to come from the graveyard. You're right; it can come from like Collected Company in Modern, but then Sneak and Show in Legacy, and even in such a powerful format where so much stuff is getting cheated in, it's not even main deckable, right? So
no.
Yeah, I did some testing with it in main board, and I was not as impressed with it as I was with Benthic Biomancer in the main board.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about Modern now, right?
Well, in Legacy, but in Modern as well. So I think that our view of Mistcaller was kind of skewed because of the environment that it was in. So it was kind of like it came out and it was like, eh. But then like immediately after that, we started seeing all these decks that were abusing the graveyard, and you know, all of a sudden Mistcaller made a lot of sense. Now that Modern is kind of not that, you know, it's not all Arclight Phoenix and Dredge and Hollow One decks. We don't have to worry as much about that effect. So it's much easier to see it for what it is, which is a very narrow card.
It's a sideboard card, right?
Yeah.
And a decent one, right? Because when its effect does hit, it can be quite strong. You know, if the opponent has 3 Arclight Phoenixes, those triggers are not optional. So, all 3 Phoenixes are just going to get exiled. And that's a pretty powerful effect for a 1-drop to have. But even though, Phoenix decks are like whatever, 6% of the meta game or whatever it is, when you compare it to the other 94%, it just, it should be in the sideboard. So
now, Joe, are you playing him in the sideboard in your deck?
I'm currently not. So okay. I'm taking an approach right now with my sideboard where I'm trying to, there's lots of obvious, different ways that you can approach sideboarding. One is to try to shore up, pretty much every matchup you could possibly have, right? And that gets pretty difficult because you find yourself being stretched really thin. And Merfolk is a deck that already has pretty 50-50-ish matchups against a lot of decks, the majority of decks, I could say. But then there are the few that really can shut us down. And those tend to be like hyper-fast aggro, pretty much hyper-fast aggro. Like that's what does us in for the most part. So my sideboard right now is just like 4 of Chalice of the Void, pretty much for like just all that stuff that goes bananas. I mean, Chalice is the best card against Affinity, but especially if you're on the play, you drop it on 0, it turns off a lot of stuff that they just spit out on turn 1. Like, what am I thinking of? Like
dropping Chalice on 0 on Affinity is like the best feeling in the world.
It's pretty good, right? So you do that on the play.
It's like Chalice on 0 Affinity, chocolate.
So hang on.
And then like some things we can't talk about because this is a PG-13 show.
Right on. I've got a good story from Chalice on 0 from just this morning. I think I was playing against. It was the first match of a competitive league, and it was an Amulet Titan deck, but they were running Lotus Blooms, which I think is like outdated tech. So obviously, against Amulet, you're going to bring in Chalice anyway because of their summoners packs. Being able to shut them off is a pretty big deal. But this guy was playing Lotus Bloom, so I had so many more targets for Chalice on 0. So in game 1, I just threw out like Chalice on 0 like pretty early. It was a little bit kind of amateurish because you want to keep it in hand until you think they might actually use a 0-drop because they could like just blow it up or something, and you really don't want to lose the Chalice. So fortunately, it got me there in game 2. But then game 3, the guy suspended 2 Lotus Blooms on turn 1.
Oh God.
And so I had like, I think I had 2 Chalices in my hand. So I was like, I had backup. So they're ticking down. I'm hitting for like 2 or 3 a turn. And this guy's got like 1 land, 2 lands. He's got no amulet. This is like his whole game plan is get 8 mana through Lotus Blooms and then just cast Elish Norn or something stupid. So yeah, it was like my turn. There was 1 counter on each Lotus Bloom. I attacked, and then second main phase, I was like, Chalice on 0, goes to his turn, counters both Lotus Blooms. He's got like 3 mana, and he just scoops. So, I mean, it's a card that can just kind of like do stupid stuff like that. And other matchups that it hits really hard that can just kind of get us and make us like suddenly go from being like a 3-2 or 4-1 league to just losing is like Boggles. Chalice just wrecks Boggles. That's kind of a fringe example. Goblins is another fringe example, like 8-whack. But the top 2 decks, we're going to be talking a little bit about the format, but the top 2 decks are Grixis Death Shadow and Izzet Phoenix right now, and those decks run like 31 drops. So you get that on the table, and you're sitting pretty against those guys. Now, even though we have solid matchups against Grixis Death Shadow and Izzet Phoenix already, extra help doesn't hurt. So.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and just move straight into the topic then. I mean, I think
we've already have done that.
Yeah,
sure.
we kind of have.
Just to finish talking, you were asking about Mistcaller in the sideboard. I prefer to have just the 4 relics because they do so much work against like the mid-range decks like Jund and Mardu and those kinds of things. So that's 8 cards already in the sideboard, which takes up most of the space. And then 2 Echoing Truths just to like bounce an Ensnaring Bridge or Worship, that kind of thing. What else do I have? I can just pull it up. I have my list right here. 3 Hurkyl's Recalls is another thing I'm doing, as I mentioned, to just address our weaknesses. So Affinity is present in like 2 different forms basically now. It's got the classic shape and then hardened scales. And Hurkyl's Recall is as good an answer as it's ever been. Like some people say, well, Affinity can still beat you. It's like, well, of course they can. They're Affinity. They can do a good job. But Hurkyl's Recall is our best.
They might be able to play 6 cards on turn 0. So
yeah, and then you bounce everything and they play it again on turn 1. And it's just like,
exactly.
So and then a couple dismembers. So it's a very, very it's a format. Sorry, it's a sideboard that's trying to address our weaknesses. But so if we're going to talk a little bit about the metagame, anybody who's listening might want to pull up MTG Goldfish's website. At the top, if you click decks and then metagame, there'll be a link from Modern. And then if you scroll down past like the top few decks, it'll say like view more. And so that's what I'm going to be looking at here. It's got like 100 decks. I mean, Modern is kind of insane.
And if you're looking at this in the future, welcome from the past.
Well, number one, this list will be updated based on whatever your current meta is whenever you're listening to this. And number two, I will also have all these links in the show notes. So if you're listening to it on your podcast app or on YouTube or whatever, you'll be able to click these links and follow along with us.
Hey, future people, wasn't February 2019 crazy?
Waka waka.
So if you guys listening have this sort of Modern metagame spread out in front of you on MTG Goldfish, I love Modern. I've been playing it a long time now. Looking at the current state of the format on the website, we can see it's incredibly vibrant and diverse. In my view, it's pretty much always been the case with the format. Many people, you hear them online. People love to complain online. They like to find all the different faults with the format. Things that they want banned.
I've always found the internet very reasonable and calm.
No, it's not. It's not. Everybody's really nasty on the internet.
What?
And so I don't know. I'm an optimist. Some of you guys who listen to my videos know that I tend to be pretty upbeat. I don't like to swear. I don't like to use a lot of blue language and things like that. So anyhow, I love Modern. It's been amazing. I started playing Magic again. I played in high school when that was like a million years ago. But I picked it up again in 2012 around Return to Ravnica. And I've been playing it since then pretty much. And with the exception of just the Eldrazi Winter, which was actually not bad for Merfolk really, because Spreading Seas did such a good job hitting Eldrazi. What was it? Eye of Ugin. That card was so stupid, and that got banned.
Or the Temple. Yeah.
Sure. Well, that's still legal, but once I got banned, things just went back to being great right away. So Modern's a great format. So, and we're going to see a little bit of that as I discuss some of the decks. So the top two decks are really interesting in my view because the fact that they're there, because of how you could describe their archetype. They really encompass kind of the whole spectrum of traditional Magic archetypes. The first three, the sort of the triangle, the rock paper scissors of Magic, are
the pyramid, if you will.
Pyramid or triangle, as you said earlier, I think. You have control, aggro, and combo, right? And one of them each beats the other one. And then somewhere down the line, some people said, what about mid-range? So mid-range is an important thing to include. So you have aggro, control, combo, mid-range. And those pretty much describe Grixis Death Shadow, like all of them, They have obvious, they can win on turn 3 if they get all of their pieces together. So that's both aggressive, obviously a combination of certain important cards that put things in the graveyard, hit their life total, give them double strike, that kind of stuff. And then very controlling and very mid-rangey with all of their removal. Izzet Phoenix is pretty similar, right? They have so much synergy with the graveyard, but they need the cards that put the things in the graveyard. And then they need other spells that enable them to just cast more than one thing in a turn, like Monomorphose. If all those things come together, it's very combo-like, and they end up with a board with a bunch of flying, 3/2s, I think is what the Phoenix is. And again, they have a bunch of removal, so they're kind of controlling, kind of mid-rangey, value-oriented in the sense that, as a mid-range deck would be, because they're getting flashback with Faithless Looting, and yeah, they bring in things like Anger of the Gods that try to stabilize in a mid game the way that a mid-range deck would. They're not all in aggro combo. So I don't know. As I was saying, kind of fascinates me that the top two decks are these very they're kind of snapshots of the format as a whole in the sense that they represent all sort of facets of how you might play Magic. What do you guys think about that? That take on that. Am I on the mark? Do you think, or?
I think you're actually in the realm of reality.
Yeah.
No. I mean, yeah, you're 100% right. I mean,
It's not like
Yeah, I'm blanking. Sorry.
No, it's okay. If you look at Legacy, for example, you have decks that are sort of super hyperlinear, like Reanimator, right? I guess Sneak and Show, those kinds of decks, they do run like counter spells, right? So they could be said to be a little bit interactive in that sense, right? But let me open up like an Is It Phoenix list, for example. You're not going to have like Sneak and Show or Reanimator running garbage like Gut Shot, right? I mean, Gut Shot is like a combo enabler, essentially, right?
Pyrexene, man, it is broken.
Well, yeah, but it's broken only in the right spot, right? Like, yeah. So Is It Phoenix, like their combo, quote unquote combo, I guess, is they want to flip Thing in the Ice by casting a ton of spells, and Gut Shot is free. So let's do that, right?
Yeah.
But they're not just the combo deck. They're like this kind of card advantage deck with Crackling Drake, drawing a bunch of cards, and I don't know. It's
you look at this deck and it almost, like, if you just glance at it for a second, reminds you of the traditional Storm deck. But then you kind of look at it and then all of a sudden you realize if they fizzle out on their Storm, they're not dead in the water like you would be playing against Storm. I mean, they got so much other things going on.
They do, and it can be quite frustrating playing against them, and you think that they fizzled, quote unquote fizzled or whatever, but then they play a Crackling Drake and it's like 20 power or something. And a lot of decks don't really have a way to deal with that. If we have a Harbinger, then great. We get to live another turn and a half or something like that. But
especially a mono blue deck with all the spot removal, right?
Right. And Dismember can do right, all the spot removal. Well, we do have Dismember, so Dismember is a great answer to correctly.
And Imprison in the Moon.
Wow.
That sweet
I have like
Eldrazi
30
tech.
of them. It's going to be awesome one day.
That's going pretty deep right there. Imprison. You're going to turn their Crackling Drake into a land, right? That's what it does?
Colorless land.
Yeah. Well, so anyhow, I just, as I was saying, like, it's really neat to me that the top two decks are these weird amalgamations of different strategies that just happen to work so sensationally with the particular cards, like Death Shadow as a card, this Arclight Phoenix as a card, right? Like, these are total build-around cards, and as it turns out, they're really powerful. So,
and just on topic, has nothing to do with Merfolk, but when people always say like Modern's a solved format, blah blah blah, I always like just bringing up Grixis Death Shadow. That deck existed for years in the format before anybody figured out it was like the best deck in the format.
I've always been a really big fan of the card Death Shadow. It's just such a fascinating design. And, you look at it and you think it's a 13/13 1-drop. How can that not get played? And now it's not only getting played, it's the number one deck in it's one of the most popular formats, right? So,
not only is it played, it's played in Legacy now.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, so I mean, yeah, they're good decks, and they kind of encapsulate the format unto themselves. But moving on, you just have so many different archetypes. Like in the first row here, I see Dredge, which is a dedicated graveyard strategy. Burn, everybody knows Burn. They're just throwing lightning bolts at your face. Banned Spirits. If you're not really familiar with the way that the deck works, it's not just like a beat your face in creature deck, right? They have things like Reflector Mage and now Deputy of Detention. Is that the name of that card? Yeah. And then what else? Spell Queller, obviously. It was like their form of a counter spell. So that deck is more controlling than I think many newcomers to the format might understand. So
wait a second. It's Corbin. Kody, correct me if I'm wrong. Corbin always says that Spell Queller's the curse catcher, the best curse catcher.
Yeah. So when we had him on, he basically said that Spell Queller is the best curse catcher that's ever been printed.
That's Corbin Hostler, by the way. You guys should go to B-Dubs and buy Squatty Potties.
Okay, whatever that means. So it's Spell Queller is an amazing card, and it's one of those cards that makes me frustrated when we get so little for Merfolk. That like why does humans get so much, or spirits, I guess, but that is a spirit in this case, I guess. Spirits and humans just seem to get so many nice toys all at once, and then we got Mistcaller. Well, anyhow,
Wizards, can we please stop making humans and have a new tribe called people?
Yeah.
Let's just stop now. We have enough humans. Let's have people from here on out.
That's not a bad suggestion, actually. So one of my friends who plays Merfolk, his name is online is Stoneheart. His real name is Kyle. He and I both loved Militia Bugler enough that we spent a good amount of this past summer testing Merfolk with Militia Bugler. Now that's, it's a little bit embarrassing, but it wins games because the card's so good, and humans can get even more out of that card. So, it's just all these random like uncommons just being so amazing for humans is kind of upsetting. But that's not really what we're talking about. Let's continue. You have Mono Green Tron. It's a ramp control deck. You have 2 pure control decks with Blue White and Jeskai. These are all like top 10 decks in Modern right now. Amulet Titan, similar to Green Tron in the sense that it's a ramp deck, but Amulet Titan is like a ramp combo deck, right? They're just trying to spit out a Titan that gets a lot of lands that do a bunch of other stuff. A little further along, you have humans, which is quite similar.
And then Mono Green Tron and Amulet Titan, the big difference, in my opinion, is Mono Green Tron's a lot more consistent, but gets a lot more hate because people are expecting it more in the sideboard when they play. Whereas the Amulet Titan deck is not as consistent, but doesn't have as many sideboard answers in opposing decks.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. It's true. They have Ancient Stirrings to dig for their amulet, but they really need to find that amulet pretty quickly. And if they don't, the deck doesn't really do nearly as well as when they do have it. So
correct. Whereas Tron has 12 of the Tron pieces and 8 eggs and a million different ways to dig out their lands. So.
Yeah, it's true. So, but both ramp decks, one kind of more control oriented, one more combo oriented. Then you have, I think these new 4-color word decks is in the top 10. I think it's like 9th place right now by percentage. So, in the top 10, you have Tron, blue-white control, Jeskai control, 4-color, they call it Prison on MTG Goldfish, but most people refer to it as Horror. So 4 out of the top 10 decks are just sort of straight up control decks. And then, yes, you do have a lot of aggro then. But, some combo too with Amulet Titan. I guess combo is the one that's being a little bit underrepresented, but Dredge can be said to be a little bit combo-y, right?
No, I completely agree. I think Dredge essentially is a combo deck.
I agree.
Yeah, it pretty much is. And some people have called Burn a combo deck, but that's just kind of silly. It's just all the same spell over and over again. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, pretty diverse just looking at like the top 10. But if you keep going, I mean, Modern is like infinitely deep. It's got so many decks that can just spike any given tournament. You've got 2 versions of Affinity, which is kind of wild that they're like not even in the top 10 right now. You've got Storm, which could beat anybody. It's just kind of like a bonkers deck. They can win on turn 3, like whenever. Mardu Pyromancer, more mid-range with Jund, and then you've got Rock that is like Jund but without the red. All these decks are getting increasingly refined with each new set that comes out. It's really amazing, like how streamlined these decks have become. Like Black Green Rock runs Field of Ruin, but Jund doesn't. And it's like one of the decks runs Kalitas or more copies of Kalitas Trader of Get, but other ones run fewer. And these are mana-based concerns and also just curve concerns. And as new sets come out, each of these decks, which, in the past could have been said to be pretty similar, are actually growing more and more unique. You've got more combo decks with Ad Nauseam. What other combo decks? Living End. You've actually got 2 nice varieties of Living End now. You've got the traditional Jund, and then you've got this blue-red version. Now, actually, there's 3. There's a Jund one. The Jund one is the classic one. Then blue-red plays As Foretold and Electro Dominance. What do you guys think about Electro Dominance? Have you seen it in the format very much?
I honestly have not seen it very much, but it's certainly an interesting deck. I mean, being able to just ramp up to those huge to a huge Electro Dominance, then like you can just you can do pretty much anything you want.
I mean, what I've been seeing, and I think the general strategy is not necessarily to get like big Electro Dominances, but just to use it as an instant speed Living End enabler. And it also just does gross stuff, like all of the 0 mana cost suspend spells like Ancestral Vision, Living End. There might be one other one that I'm forgetting. Well, Restore Balance is in another deck, but if they have As Foretold down, they can cast free Ancestral Recalls. Basically, it's really kind of dirty with that combo. So Electro Dominance, they can cast a free Ancestral Vision also. So it's a really neat deck. I think we have a very good matchup against it. It doesn't matter if you're running Benthic Biomancer, which can actually dump a creature into the graveyard on our side, which makes it better against Living End. or Mistcaller, which just can just exile. Actually, is Mistcaller good? No, it is good because it specifies. I was thinking about like Graph.
Don't go back on your hot take. Mistcaller's awful.
And I didn't mean good in the matchup. I mean good in the matchup because some certain cards care about whether things are coming from the graveyard or from exile or whatever. But Mistcaller just cares if you don't cast it, basically. So really good against Living End, obviously.
Yeah. Now,
we have
real
a lot.
quick.
Yeah, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
I was going to say. So I think this is actually a good transition point because you brought up Benthic Biomancer. One thing that we're seeing right now is Merfolk is actually increasing in popularity and increasing their wins, not only on MTGO, but in tournament scenes as well. And it kind of is going hand in hand with Benthic Biomancer. Now, Benthic Biomancer getting printed has been kind of the exact same time that my time between school life and everything else has hit me like a ton of bricks. So I haven't been able to see so much of it. Is he really the one that has really put Merfolk over the top and is making it more of a competitive deck? And also, is it true that you're the one who came up with the nickname Ben?
So, all good observations. I want to say that when you guys first contacted me to do the show, I was looking at all this metagame stuff, and things move around pretty quickly in Modern, and the cumulative percentage for Merfolk was around 0.75%. And just in the last week, it's grown to just over 1%, which is a significant increase for such a small deck. It's like
I think it's the most I've ever seen it.
No. It's been much. It was tier 1 for a few months, a couple of years ago.
I'm about to say it's been a while. It's been a long while.
It has been a long while. We have definitely been tier 2/tier 3 for a good amount of time. But to get to your questions, I guess. So Benthic Biomancer, when it was spoiled, I got really excited, and it was an interesting moment because not everybody had the same take that I did. I thought it was like a clear-cut winner, and others were much more hesitant about the card. And it's still, I guess it's still hard to say definitively that it's one of the main contributors to the recent run of sort of 5 consecutive 5-0 lists that have been posted recently. I can't remember the last time we've had a streak like this on the mothership with these 5-0 lists. But what jumped out to me about the card was that it did a lot of things that I think we've wanted a 1-drop to do, or any card in our deck to do for that matter, but we've been limited. And so, as I was discussing earlier on the podcast, Mistcaller is pretty narrow. Ben's sort of the opposite. It's broadly applicable. The ability can be activated, and you can benefit from it in literally any matchup. So you just pay 2 mana. He becomes a 2/2, and you get to loot. So presumably you're improving the quality of the cards in your hand. Those are all things that can benefit us in any game. Now, there are some super aggressive matchups where we don't necessarily always have mana up to dump into Ben. But in those matchups, if we have things to use our mana for, like playing Lords or holding up mana for counter spells, that kind of thing, then let's go ahead and use the mana for that. Ben is still a 1/1, like Curse Catcher and Mistcaller have been forever. But as I mentioned, the ability is really relevant. Just having a 2/2 that was a 1-drop in your deck, now it's on the, yes, you've paid 3 mana to get it to the point where it's a 2/2, but that's a card in your deck that previously, if you were playing 1-drops, would have always been a 1/1. So I've won many games where I've just been able to turn a 2/2 sideways, where a 1/1 just really wouldn't have cut the job. It's just half the clock,
Another cool thing too is I remember back with Aether Revolt or Kaladesh actually, that a lot of Merfolk players in both Legacy and Modern were playtesting Looter Scooter really hard for that looting ability.
That's true.
And it just never worked out. It just wasn't good enough. At Legacy, it saw a little bit more play than Modern, but I think Benthic really gives the deck that looting ability that really kind of like helps it out.
So
where Looter Scooter just kind of failed on it.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Where Looter Scooter just failed.
Well, the thing about Looter Scooter, Smuggler's Copter. There we go.
Scooter.
I was trying to remember what it was. Smuggler's Copter. People still play it today. It's a really good card. It's not just Merfolk, but like Death and Taxes lists still run Smuggler's Copter. It's super solid. But there's actually beyond the idea that I just shared that Ben's ability is really broad. Something else that it does is, as you said, two other things, I guess, is the loot. Yes, it's on a Merfolk body now, right? So we don't have to loot outside of our tribe to get that kind of filtering effect that we so badly need. I think one of the shortcomings of other tribes in Modern, like humans and spirits, is they don't have sort of cards that can help them against mid-range decks. They just run out of steam and that's it. We have Silver Gills.
Say that out loud. Wizards are going to print a human that does that now.
Oh man, actually they got Militia Bugler, which is really good actually. So anyhow, I guess yeah. So yes, having a loot effect on a Merfolk is just phenomenal. And yeah, so I don't think we're going to play Smuggler's Copter anytime soon. Another side of Ben that I immediately sort of latched onto when I saw it spoiled was the fact that its ability can be activated at instant speed. Like when I saw this new ability on this card, I read to see like that sorcery speed text, where it's like this ability can only be activated anytime you could cast a sorcery, but I didn't see it. So I was like, oh, that's amazing. We can hold up mana. And then, you start to brainstorm and you're just like, well, this is a direction that Merfolk has actually been moving in for the last year or so with Merfolk Trickster. Many people run like a single Echoing Truth or Dismembers or Vapor Snags. Harbinger of the Tide, if you have 4 mana up. We have a lot of things that let us hold up mana. So you play Ben on turn 1. Turn 2, you just pass the turn to the opponent, puts them in a tough spot because what could you be representing? Should they play their Haymaker if you're on the draw, like on turn 3? Are they going to play Liliana of the Veil and get it countered? Or are they going to just play something a little bit less impactful? In which case, at the end of the turn, you can just activate Ben's adaptability. Now, all of a sudden, you're improving your hand. You have a 2/2. So yeah, Ben just is like it's kind of like grease that just makes the deck work a lot smoother. And so I guess the idea, I didn't really actually say it clearly, is that adding instant speed effects like that to the deck makes it that much easier for us to run main deck 2 mana counter spells. So that when we pass with Ben on the table, we're representing that much broader a spectrum of like potential threats and answers all at once against opponents. So that's been working out really well. All of the 5-0 lists recently by Merfolk have had both 4 Bens and 4 main deck counter spells. Some people run Deprive, some people run Wizard's Retort, some people are running Monoleak. So we'll get to a consensus on that eventually. But the consensus already seems to be arrived at that it's a good idea to be running these 2 mana counter spells alongside Ben.
Now, in your opinion, is that what's putting Merfolk over the top? Because something's happening. There's a catalyst occurring that's making Merfolk more competitive and pushing it further up into the tier 2, hopefully tier 1.5 in the near future. Is that the definitive answer, or at least your hypothesis?
Well, some people seem really quick to say things like, we have favorable matchups at the top of the format. And I think that's true to an extent. We're pretty good against Death Shadow, and we're pretty good against the Phoenix decks. And, we've always been okay against Burn. We struggle a little bit against Dredge and some of the other decks, but those top decks, we do have good matchups. And so that could obviously be contributing towards sort of an apparent resurgence in Merfolk in popularity. But the fact that the deck lists are all so similar in the past, even a month ago, Merfolk decks were all over the place. You had people running Curse Catchers, you had people running Mistcallers, you had people running no 1-drops at all. You had some people running Spell Pierce, some people not running Spell Pierce. You have so many people on blue-green still after Ixalan, that ridiculous set that split our tribe up into, the 2 camps. You have mono blue, you have blue-green. So to answer your question, I definitely think that Ben seems to be all right, I'm going to speak from my own personal point of view after running, it must be at this point in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 leagues with Ben, and my win rate is, I'd say in general, on average, slightly higher than it was in the past, but the format is getting faster and more powerful. And the fact that I can sustain my win rate just means that our deck is keeping up with this crazy format. The main deck counterspells give us answers to so much that can be thrown at us. It's like hard counters don't care if it's ad nauseum or a Gurmag Angler. You could just counter it. So that flexibility is really strong, and it's definitely been contributing. You can look at it one of two ways. You can say we're doing well because of the format is moving, or you can say we're doing well because of this new card and this new approach. And it's how are you going to prove one or the other?
Yeah, I'd say to jump in and kind of interrupt you there. It's kind of like how at the top of the show I'd said that our view of Mistcaller was kind of skewed because of the state of the meta, and so maybe people's evaluation of Mistcaller was kind of skewed because of like the decks that we were facing on a regular basis. Now, Ben. And Rothgar and I in episode 50, we had a fairly good discussion about Ben as well, just kind of being a better average case scenario over Curse Catcher and Mistcaller. Like you said, there are lots of decks that Mistcaller has a very narrow application of, but on the whole, against most decks, Ben is just a better card in almost all situations. Now with the meta kind of dividing a little bit and kind of spreading out and kind of getting away from these graveyard decks and these kind of is it Phoenix decks? You're right. It is really hard to say whether it's the meta kind of spreading out, or it's Ben kind of assisting us by either filtering away a late game Aether Vial, or filtering away like a third Harbinger or something like that that's not useful. There's just so many factors.
That ability that you just said is really, really strong. It's pretty much equivalent to drawing a card, and to have a 1-drop that gives you access to card advantage is pretty massive. I mean, humans for a while had access to Thraben Inspector and was playing it. They've moved past it because they're really all about aggro at this point, with a couple of slightly controlling elements with Meddling Mage and Reflector Mage. And if any game goes sort of late, Ben very quickly becomes extra Silvergill Adepts, because if we haven't closed out a game already, it's probably because we drew too many Ether Vials or drew too many lands, and being able to throw one of those away and draw something else off the top of our deck is incredibly powerful. There's a lot of people who just think Silvergill is the best Merfolk in the deck, and to get 4 more of those is pretty sensational. Well, you might say, well, most games are going super fast in Modern, but I have to say, from my own experience, and now this is really the crux of the matter for me, I think, is that I've been so deeply dissatisfied with our 1-drops for forever, and I got this card, Benthic Biomancer, in the deck, and suddenly it felt like a big part of what the deck was lacking is suddenly there. Like we have something we can lean on at the beginning of the game. Whereas Curse Catcher, it's like what is he doing? Like he gets in 1 damage, and then you sack him and you counter like a Monomorphos, and you're like, yes, so much value. And I guess it's like a 1 damage counter, a 2-drop kind of instant or sorcery. But Ben, I mean, he's a 2/2 that you don't have to sacrifice, right? He's just a 2/2 that stays on the board and can draw you cards. It's just ridiculous. The fact that it takes so much convincing for so many people. I've been sold on this card for a while now, and I think everybody who plays Merfolk should be playing it, and it takes time, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
To answer your question before, I did actually coin the name Ben, so let's just get that in the record books.
All right. Well,
you heard it here first.
I generally agree with everything that you've said. I think that Ben is at least going forward kind of where we want to be. And
this is probably the most exciting Merfolk has been since Master Waves is in print, right?
It's definitely a really exciting moment. Master of Waves was a funny one because there was probably more disagreement about Master of Waves than there is about Ben. People thought a 4-drop was not, quote unquote, not what Merfolk wants to be doing. People would say like, oh, why didn't you just play 2 Lords on turn 4? I guess. I mean, it's like, it's apples and bananas or whatever. So two very different plays. But anyhow, obviously Master of Waves is amazing. It just takes people a while to realize these things. So yes, when Master of Waves came out, we were really excited about it once we realized it was good. And I think people are starting to realize how good Ben is. There will be another 5.0 list, what do you call it, like a drop on the mothership tomorrow. So let's hope that, Merfolk continues its streak.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Joe, for coming on to share your thoughts about where Modern is and kind of how Ben has kind of been affecting Merfolk in the format. I agree with you wholeheartedly that we're doing pretty good so far. We're on a tear. So everybody in the Merfolk community, let's keep this up. Let's keep things going and get a few more slam dunks and publishes on Wizards Mothership page. Matt, do you have any closing arguments?
No, I am not down on Merfolk right now. And I've been honest with you guys, and I've been down for a while, but I think it's on the upswing. So, golf clap. Awesome.
Thank you. I wanted to put one more little thing in, is that Mark Rosewater, has been dropping some hints lately about a set that's going to come out sometime, presumably in the next half year or so. It's one of their quote unquote, I guess, like innovation sets, I think, where it's like conspiracy, those kinds of sets. But this one is, according to him, going to have an impact on Modern. So hard to decipher what impact might mean, but if it's just like reprints, it doesn't seem like impact is the right word, right? So what a lot of people are thinking is that this might be a set where cards are getting put directly into Modern, sort of bypassing Standard. So this might be an opportunity for them to get Counterspell into the format, which would be a strict upgrade for our deck, since we're starting to run cards like Deprive and Wizard's Retort, which are just like bad counterspells. So it's an exciting time for sure, and that's just adding more fuel to the fire. I think this possible cool set that's going to come out.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to it. Joe, before we close out here, where can we find you again on the internet?
Well, I'm on YouTube. I guess just type in Merfolk Joe and you'll find me right away. And I do have a Patreon page for any of you guys who want to support the YouTube channel. It's just patreon.com/Merfolk Joe. And that's about it.
And one other thing I would like to say is I think that one of the easiest places to find you is the Merfolk Discord channel. You're fairly active in there as well, discussing mostly Modern, but a few other things in the Merfolk channel there. So it's been really cool to be able to pick your brain on Discord and see what you're thinking about where we are and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, I hope I haven't been too unfocused. I hope that I'm making some sense. It's a little bit late here in New York, and just
that's why we was letting you go. It's been great. Like it's been more like a master's class. I'm sitting here just taking notes. I'm glad it's recorded so I can go back and listen to it again.
And remember that you can reach out and talk to us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook is at fishcastmtg. We're also on the Merfolk subreddit, the Merfolk Discord channel, the Facebook group, our own Facebook channel. Basically, anywhere you can find us, we're at fishcastmtg. Personally, on Twitter, I am not Kody Smith. And Matt, where can we find you on Twitter?
I'm Matthew Caudill 8.
If you have a longer form question, feel free to email us.
And Joe's not on Twitter. He should be. Yeah, come on Twitter. Join us on the Twit.
On the Twit, you abbreviated Twitter.
I only have so many characters.
If you have a longer form question, feel free to email us at fishcastmtg@gmail.com. Our cover art was made by Tessa and Hunter Pruitt, and our logo and stream art was done by Ishton on Twitter. If you like what we're doing here, please rate and subscribe in the Apple or Google Play Podcast App Store, as well as find us on Patreon at patreon.com/fishcastmtg. Thank you, everybody, so much for your time, and we will see you all next week.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, guys.